The car shuddered to a halt, the hydraulics sighing like a dying beast. Palazzo Silenzio. The name itself felt like a lie, a cruel joke whispered in a language I couldn't quite place. The translation program, a desperate attempt to piece together the fragments of my memory, sputtered, layering, verdant, consume. Over the engine's final groan, I ignored it as I'd been doing for weeks. Ignoring the glitches was becoming a survival skill. The air here was wrong. A damp, metallic chill clung to everything, a palpable weight pressing against my skin. Rain, the scent of rain on pavement, impossibly strong for a place that hadn't seen precipitation in months, according to the automated weather reports. It clung to the polished steel of the Palazzo's facade, reflecting the oppressive blackness back at me. High gloss, relentlessly smooth, devoid of any comforting imperfection. The lobby was vast, echoing with a silence that felt actively hostile. Marble floors, black as obsidian, stretched into the gloom. A single, recessed light fixture buzzed overhead, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. The translation program hiccuped, spitting out a garbled phrase, "Root deep." I pressed the activation button, trying to mute the interference, but it only seemed to intensify the static. Then I saw it, perched on a velvet chaise lounge, a cat. Not just any cat. This one had one eye replaced by a corroded brass astrolabe, its surface pitted and green with verdigris. It stared at me, unblinking, the astrolabe reflecting the distorted light in a dizzying spiral. The metallic rasp of its fur against the velvet was a sound that burrowed into my skull. It didn't flinch, didn't move, just watched. My apartment was on the 4th floor, accessible by a lift that ascended with a slow, deliberate groan. The hallway was long, lined with identical doors, each a slab of black steel. The quartz crystal oscillator frequency modulation began, a high-pitched hum that resonated in my teeth. It wasn't loud, but it was present, a constant, unsettling vibration beneath the surface of everything. It felt deliberate. The apartment itself was sparsely furnished. A bed, a desk, a single chair, utilitarian. Cold. I dropped my bag, the leather thudding softly against the polished concrete floor. The rain scent was stronger here, clinging to the fabric of my clothes. I ran a hand over the wallpaper sending, a repeating pattern of stylized leaves, rendered in a sickly metallic sheen. It felt wrong somehow, too precise, too perfect. I tried to unpack to create some semblance of order, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. It wasn't a visual sensation, not exactly. It was more of a pressure, a tightening in my chest, a prickling at the back of my neck. I kept glancing at the door, expecting something. I didn't know what. The cat hadn't followed me. I hadn't seen it since the lobby. But I felt it, a silent, watchful presence lurking just beyond the periphery of my vision. The translation program coughed, a fractured sentence emerging from the static, the bloom. I walked to the window, peering out at the city below. The lights were blurred, indistinct, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. The quartz hum intensified, vibrating through the glass, through my bones. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of recognition, a memory fleeting and fragmented, of a place like this, a place of polished steel and unnatural rain, a place where plants grew, not as they should. Then, a voice, distorted, filtered through the malfunctioning translation program, barely audible above the hum. A whisper, cold and insidious, that seemed to crawl directly into my mind. He remembers. The whisper lingered, a phantom vibration against my teeth fuffened. He remembers. I forced myself to breathe, to anchor myself to the sterile reality of the apartment. The photograph. It was the key. I was certain of it. Or perhaps a symptom. Another glitch in the system I had to understand. The palazzo's layout wasn't detailed in the scant documentation I'd received. A sprawling labyrinth of corridors and chambers, seemingly designed to discourage exploration. Still, a compulsion, a subtle tug at the back of my mind, urged me onward. The quartz hum pulsed, a low thrum that seemed to resonate with my own rising anxiety. I walked the polished concrete, cold and unforgiving, beneath my shoes. Each footfall echoed, swallowed by the oppressive silence. The rain scent intensified as I descended, clinging to the air like a shroud. It wasn't a pleasant smell, it was sharp, metallic, tinged with something else. Something vaguely floral, yet undeniably wrong. I navigated the endless hallways, the identical steel doors blurring into a monotonous procession. The translation program sputtered, a fractured phrase. The archive. Hidden. I ignored it, pushing onward. I found it tucked away on the 3rd floor, a room not marked on any of the schematics. A library, or what remained of one. Dust lay thick on the shelves, undisturbed for decades. The air hung heavy, stagnant, the rain scent almost overpowering. Sunlight filtered through grime. Coated windows cast long, skeletal shadows across the room. Fisilustle, rustle lie. The sound of dry parchment disturbed the silence, and I froze. It was the cat, perched atop a towering bookshelf, its astrolabe eye gleaming in the dim light. It didn't move, didn't acknowledge my presence, just watched. I began to sift through the decaying volumes, the brittle pages crumbling at my touch. The script was archaic, a dialect of Italian I barely recognized. Most of the texts were religious in nature, filled with florid prose and unsettling illustrations. Then I saw it. A ledger, bound in cracked leather, tucked away in a forgotten corner. Hofer, crack. Snap. The sound of its spine as I opened it. The pages were filled with faded ink, meticulous script detailing. Something agricultural records mostly. Crop yields, soil composition, irrigation techniques. But interspersed among the mundane data were sketches, crude, unsettling drawings of plants. Plants I didn't recognize, plants that shouldn't exist. And then, there it was, the photograph. It was the courtyard I'd glimpsed from my apartment window, but different. The vegetation was wrong, lush, overgrown, almost aggressively vibrant. Plants with leaves like polished obsidian, vines that twisted into unnatural shapes, flowers that bloomed in colors that shouldn't exist. The anachronism was blatant. The style of the building, the clothing of the figures depicted, all suggested a period centuries earlier than the palazzo's supposed construction. The cat's rasping breath echoed in the silence. It was closer now, perched on a nearby table, its astrolabe eye fixated on the photograph. I felt a surge of irrational anger, a desperate need to dismiss it all as a fabrication, a trick of the light, a historical anomaly, a delusion. It's just old photographs, I muttered, the words sounding hollow and unconvincing even to my own ears. Perspective, the angle. It's nothing. The rain scent intensified, clinging to my skin, saturating the air. It was localized now, a concentrated pocket of dampness emanating from the ledger itself. I tried to close the book to shut out the unsettling images, but my fingers seemed to be frozen in place. The quartz hum escalated, vibrating through the room, through my bones. I felt a sudden sharp pang of recognition, a memory fragmented and distorted of a place like this. A place where plants grew, not naturally, not as they should. Then a faint sound, a rhythmic clicking, almost imperceptible at first. Click, click. It seemed to be coming from the astrolabe eye. I looked up, and the corroded brass surface glinted, reflecting the photograph's image back at me. A distorted, fragmented reflection of the unnatural courtyard, of the impossible vegetation. The clicking grew louder, faster, a mechanical pulse that resonated with the quartz hum. And then, darkness. The darkness receded, leaving a ringing in my ears, a phantom vibration that lingered long after the mechanical clicking ceased. The quartz hum persisted, a low thrum beneath my skin, a constant reminder of what? I wasn't sure. Disorientation clung to me, a film over my perception. I blinked, trying to clear the afterimage of the distorted courtyard from my mind. The photograph lay open on the table, the unnatural vegetation a mocking testament to some impossible reality. The cat remained on the table, its astrolabe eye unwavering. Fofisk. Suk. Her dry, rasping sound, like metal against bone. It felt less like observation now, more like encouragement. The rain scent, still potent, seemed to emanate directly from the ledger, a localized dampness clinging to the aged leather. I tried to close the book, to seal away the unsettling images, but my hand trembled, refusing to obey. The translation program sputtered, a fractured phrase echoing in my mind. The gardener remembers. It wasn't a direct translation this time, more like a fragment of thought implanted, unwelcome. The gardener, who was the gardener? The phrase felt significant, a key to some hidden understanding, or perhaps another layer of delusion. My pulse quickened, a frantic drum against my ribs. I noticed something then, something I'd missed in my initial scan of the ledger, pressed between two brittle pages, a single flower. It was withered, desiccated, but the color was wrong, an unnatural shade of green, almost luminous in the dim light. It smelled faintly of the rain scent, intensified, corrupted. I picked it up, the brittle petals crumbling at my touch. For rustle, snap. A tiny unsettling sound. The cat shifted, its astrolabe eye gleaming. It turned and padded silently towards a far corner of the room, pausing at a section of wall I hadn't noticed before. A concealed door, seamlessly integrated into the bookshelves. The quartz hum intensified, resonating with a low thrum that seemed to vibrate from the wall itself. The translation program fractured again. Beyond. The tending. I followed the cat, a reluctant participant in its silent directive. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a small hidden chamber. The air within was thick, stagnant, heavy with the scent of decay. Decaying furniture filled the room, a chaise lounge upholstered in faded velvet, a writing desk covered in dust, a single, overturned chair. A palpable sense of dread permeated the space, a weight pressing down on my chest. Creak, groan. The sound of the floorboards settling beneath my weight. That night the dreams came, not the fleeting, fragmented images I'd experienced before, but a fully realized nightmare. I was in a garden, but not a garden of earthly origin. The plants were monstrous, their leaves like polished obsidian, their vines twisting into grotesque shapes. They pulsed with an unnatural light, a sickly green glow that illuminated a landscape of impossible beauty and profound horror. Voices whispered around me, unintelligible at first, then coalescing into a single sibilant phrase. He remembers, the tending. I struggled to move, to scream, but my limbs were heavy, unresponsive. The vines reached out, tendrils of green snaking around my ankles, my wrists, my throat. I felt a presence, vast and ancient, looming over me, a silent observer of my terror. Then, a single image, clear and sharp, a pair of eyes gleaming in the darkness, the same cold, metallic sheen of an astrolabe. I woke with a gasp, my heart pounding against my ribs. The apartment was silent, the quartz hum a constant, unsettling presence. The rain scent lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable. I sat up in bed, disoriented, my skin slick with sweat. Scratch, scratch, a sound from the floor. I looked down. A single green vine snaked across the polished concrete, its tendrils reaching towards my bed. It was thin, fragile, almost translucent, but undeniably there. And it smelled of rain. The vine receded, retracting into the shadows beneath the bed with an unnerving swiftness. Rain, the scent clung to the air, a phantom dampness that raised gooseflesh on my arms. I needed to move, to do something, anything, to dispel the lingering dread. The palazzo was vast, a labyrinth of echoing hallways and forgotten chambers. Perhaps answers lay hidden within its depths, buried beneath layers of history and decay. I rose, the floorboards groaning a protest beneath my weight. The quartz hum vibrated through my bones, a constant, unsettling pulse. The cat watched from the corner, its astrolabe eye a cold, metallic gleam in the dim light. Tatzik, tatzik. The dry, rasping sound seemed almost mocking. It wanted me to leave, to abandon the search. But I couldn't. Not anymore. The hallways were longer than I remembered, the shadows deeper. The once familiar layout of the palazzo seemed to subtly shift. A trick of the light, or perhaps something more sinister. Each footfall echoed, amplified by the oppressive silence. The sudden cessation of all animal vocalizations remained a constant, unsettling anomaly. No birdsong, no rustling in the ivy, only the hollow resonance of my own breathing. I navigated through a series of ornate archways, the polished marble cold and slick beneath my fingertips. The high-gloss black of the walls seemed to absorb the light, creating an atmosphere of claustrophobic dread. I was searching for something. I wasn't sure what. A clue, a pattern, anything to explain the escalating strangeness. Finally, I found it. A door, almost imperceptible, concealed behind a tapestry depicting a scene of Renaissance revelry. It opened with a soft click, revealing a small, hidden workshop. The air within was thick with the scent of oil paints and dust. Tools lay scattered across a workbench, chisels, brushes, and a collection of tarnished brass instruments. And then I saw it. A lantern. It sat on a small table, its glass clouded with age. I picked it up, the metal cold and heavy in my hand. Click. Hiss. A faint spark ignited within the glass, casting a flickering yellow light across the room. The light revealed fleeting shapes, indistinct figures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Spectral forms, translucent and ephemeral, moving just beyond the periphery of my vision. They were gone as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind only a lingering chill. Crackle. Pop. The lantern flame sputtered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The cat watched intently, its astrolabe eye reflecting the lantern's light. It tilted its head, as if observing the spectral figures with a knowing gaze. I felt a surge of paranoia, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Was I alone? Was someone else here, manipulating events, orchestrating this unsettling charade? Il Custode, I whispered, the name forming on my lips without conscious thought. The keeper, someone responsible for maintaining the palazzo's secrets, for guarding its hidden truths. A shadowy figure, a silent observer. The translation program sputtered, a fractured phrase echoing in my mind. The watching, the keeping, widemi. The palazzo's architecture seemed to shift again, the hallways stretching, distorting. The polished steel of the walls reflected my own distorted image, a fragmented and unsettling reflection of my sanity. I felt a growing sense of disorientation, a blurring of the lines between reality and illusion. The quartz hum intensified, resonating with a low thrum that seemed to vibrate from the very foundations of the palazzo. Then, one of the spectral figures solidified, momentarily. It stood just beyond the lantern's light, its face obscured by shadow. I could make out the vague outline of a human form, but its features were blurred, indistinct. It seemed to be observing me, studying me with an unsettling intensity. Furi rustle, whisper, a faint sound like the rustling of fabric. The figure reached out a hand, a gesture of, what? Warning. Threat. I couldn't tell. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished. The lantern's light dimmed, plunging the workshop back into shadow. The only sound was the crackling of the dying flame and the dry, rasping funsk. Tutsk. Fi. The cat moved, a silent, metallic glide across the polished floor, its astrolabe eye fixed on a shadowed archway, a silent command. I followed the quartz hum, a persistent tremor in my skull. The workshop, the lantern, it all felt like a fever dream now, a fragile distraction from the encroaching dread. The hallways spiraled downwards, the ornate archways giving way to rough-hewn stone. The high-gloss black vanished, replaced by damp, moss-slicked walls. The scent of rain, that phantom dampness, intensified, clinging to the air like a shrouded drip. Drip, drip. The sound echoed in the cavernous space, amplified by the oppressive silence. No birdsong, no rustling ivy, only the steady, rhythmic percussion of falling water. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else. Something acrid, vaguely metallic. I ran a hand along the cold stone wall, the surface slick with moisture. The translation program sputtered, a fragmented phrase surfacing. The roots, they reach. Roots, the vine. It felt less like a metaphor now, and more like a physical reality, a creeping tendril insinuating itself into the palazzo's very foundations. The cat paused before a heavy iron-bound door. It rubbed against the metal, a dry, rasping sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Hutsk, tutsk, a silent invitation. Or perhaps a warning. The door groaned open with a protracted screech, revealing a chamber bathed in an unnatural gloom. The dripping intensified, a constant, insistent rhythm. Drip, 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 drip. My boots splashed in puddles of stagnant water. The chamber was vast, the ceiling lost in shadow. The air hung thick and still, heavy with the scent of decay. I raised the lantern, its flickering light revealing a scene of unsettling disarray. Stone benches lay overturned, scattered with fragments of pottery and bone. The floor was slick with a dark, viscous substance that reflected the lantern light like spilled oil. Then I saw them, scattered across the chamber, arranged in grotesque tableau. Fractured bones, dislocated joints, the remnants of something human. I couldn't be sure. The translation program emitted a burst of static, then a single chilling word, sacrifice. My stomach churned. The palazzo wasn't just old, it was sous-tentedine. The cat circled the chamber, its astrolabe eye gleaming in the gloom. It paused before a pile of debris, emitting a low growl, a guttural rumble that vibrated in my chest. Titsk, titsk. It wanted me to look. I knelt, pushing aside the broken pottery and fragments of bone. The air grew colder, the scent of damp earth almost overwhelming. More phrases flickered across my mind, disjointed and nonsensical. The bloom, the offering, the keeping, the keeper, Il Custode. Was this his domain? Had he orchestrated this? This charnel house, the paranoia tightened its grip, a vice around my sanity. I felt eyes on me, unseen observers lurking in the shadows. The quartz hum intensified, a low thrum that resonated with the dripping water, creating a dissonant, unsettling symphony. Crack. Hiss. The lantern sputtered, threatening to extinguish. I rose, my legs trembling. The chamber seemed to shift, the shadows deepening, the dripping accelerating. The translation program erupted in a cacophony of fragmented phrases. By where the tendrils, they bind. Tendrils, the vine. It was everywhere, wasn't it? In the walls, in the shadows, in my mind. The cat led me to a far corner of the chamber, to a raised platform shrouded in darkness. I hesitated, the dread palpable, the dripping intensified, a relentless, hypnotic rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. Duh. The lantern light revealed a single, perfectly preserved human hand lying on a bed of damp moss. It was pristine, untouched by the decay that permeated the rest of the chamber and intertwined with it a thick, thorny vine. Its tendrils wrapped around the hand, a verdant embrace that seemed both protective and predatory. The vine pulsed with a faint internal light, a sickly green glow that illuminated the hand with an eerie radiance. The translation program emitted a final, fractured phrase, a single, chilling word. Welcome. The hand, the vine. The word furti welcome. It clung to me, a residue of dread coating my tongue. Il Custode, it had to be him. The scattered bones, the unsettling arrangements. This wasn't the work of a madman. It was a ritual, a deliberate, calculated offering. The palazzo wasn't just old, it was a temple, and I was an unwitting supplicant. The cat emitted another low rumble, a silent command. I didn't need a translation program to understand. It wanted me to move. I pushed myself off the platform, the damp moss clinging to my trousers. The dripping seemed to mock me, a relentless percussion against the silence. Drip, 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 drip tie. I had to find him. Il Custode, stop whatever he was planning. My boots scraped against the slick stone floor as I hurried towards the archway. The quartz hum in my skull intensified, a throbbing pressure that resonated with the dripping water, a sickening harmony. Crack. Hiss. The lantern sputtered again, threatening to plunge me into absolute darkness. I tightened my grip on the handle, willing it to stay alight. The corridors beyond the chamber were a twisting labyrinth of stone and shadow. The ornate archways, once symbols of grandeur, now felt like the gaping mouths of some monstrous beast. The palazzo seemed to breathe, the very walls shifting and groaning around me. I ran, my footsteps echoing with a hollow resonance. Thud, thud, thud. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, as if the building itself were resisting my progress. The cat darted ahead, a silent, metallic shadow flitting through the darkness. I followed, my breath ragged in my chest. The hallways seemed to lengthen, to twist and contort, defying any sense of spatial logic. I swore I'd passed the same crumbling fresco twice. The translation program sputtered, emitting a burst of static, then a fragmented phrase, the path. It changes. It wasn't just disorientation, it was manipulation. The scent of rain intensified, a phantom dampness clinging to the air. It wasn't the smell of a gentle shower, it was the suffocating aroma of a flooded basement of decay and stagnation. I wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead, the taste bitter and metallic. The quartz hum escalated, a high-pitched whine that threatened to shatter my teeth. I rounded a corner, and the hallway abruptly ended, a blank stone wall. I swore I'd just been here. The cat sat patiently before the wall, its astrolabe fixed on a single point. I ran my hand along the cold stone, searching for a seam, a hidden door. Scrape, scrape. My fingers brushed against something rough, a subtle indentation in the wall. A pressure plate. I pressed down. A grinding sound echoed through the hallway as a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. The cat slipped through without hesitation. I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. The passage was cramped and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of damp earth. Drip, drip, drip. The sound seemed closer now, more oppressive. I burst out of the passage into a vast, circular chamber. The ceiling was lost in shadow, the walls lined with towering bookshelves filled with crumbling tomes. A grand staircase spiraled upwards, disappearing into the darkness, and at the foot of the staircase a figure, cloaked in shadow, his face obscured by a deep cowl. He was tall, gaunt, and moved with an unsettling grace. Il Custode. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. He didn't acknowledge my presence, didn't even seem to notice me. He simply turned and disappeared around a corner of the staircase, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Thud, thud. I started to run, my boots pounding on the stone floor. Thud, thud, thud. Thud. I rounded the corner, but he was gone. Vanished. The quartz hum in my skull reached a fever pitch, a deafening roar that drowned out all other sounds. The dripping intensified, a relentless, hypnotic rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. I was alone for now. The air tasted of dust and despair. I lunged, the lantern a frantic beacon in the oppressive gloom. He hadn't moved, hadn't reacted to my approach. A phantom stillness clung to him, a mockery of life. Thud, thud, thud. My boots hammered against the stone, each impact a desperate plea for reality. The quartz hum in my skull ate, a relentless drilling that threatened to shatter my sanity. The translation program sputtered, a chaotic jumble of voices, twenty, a woman's laugh, a child's cry, a man's guttural growl. all layered atop each other, a discordant symphony of madness. I swung, the lantern connecting with something solid. A grunt, a brief stagger. He was real, or at least he seemed to be. The cowl shifted, revealing a sliver of pale skin, a glimpse of shadowed eyes. He raised a hand, not in defense, but in a slow, deliberate gesture, as if measuring my desperation. The scent of rain intensified, clinging to my throat like a shroud. It wasn't rain, not really. It was the smell of decay, of something ancient and suffocating. He moved with an unsettling grace, a fluidity that defied his apparent age. A feint to the left, then a swift counterattack. I parried, the impact jarring my arm. The lantern swung wildly, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the towering bookshelves. Crack, hiss. The light flickered, threatening to extinguish, plunging us into absolute darkness. I felt a sharp pain in my ribs, a searing heat blooming across my chest. He was stronger than he looked. The cat watched from the shadows, its astrolabe eye reflecting the flickering light. A silent observer, a metallic sentinel. I tried to focus, to analyze his movements, to find a weakness. The translation program shrieked, a distorted voice repeating, "The echo. It deceives and deceives." I pressed my attack, driven by a primal instinct for survival. A desperate flurry of blows, each one met with effortless parries. He didn't fight with aggression, but with precision, with a calculated efficiency that was far more terrifying. Thud, thud. My breath came in ragged gasps, my muscles burning with exhaustion. I stumbled, nearly falling, the taste of blood bitter on my tongue. The quartz hum became a physical pressure, squeezing my temples, blurring my vision. I saw an opening, a momentary lapse in his defense. I lunged, aiming for his midsection. The lantern connected with a sickening thud, and he staggered back, his form flickering like a dying flame. He cried out, a strangled gasp abruptly cut off. I felt a surge of triumph, a fleeting moment of victory. He dissolved. Not disintegrated, not vanished, but dissolved. Like a mirage in the desert heat, his form fragmented, the shadows coalescing, the light fading. The scent of rain receded, leaving behind the stale, oppressive odor of the palazzo. I stood there, panting, my heart pounding, the lantern trembling in my hand. The cat emerged from the shadows, its astrolabe eye fixed on me. It emitted a low rumble, a silent question. I looked around, expecting to see him reappear, to hear him laugh. But there was nothing. Only silence. Only shadows. Only the relentless, hypnotic drip. Drip, drip, drip. The translation program fell silent, leaving only the echoing emptiness of my own thoughts. I was alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. The dissolution wasn't complete. A residue lingered, a shimmering distortion in the air, like heat rising from asphalt. The scent of rain, faint but persistent, clung to the space where he'd been. I lowered the lantern, its beam trembling across the towering bookshelves, each volume a silent testament to a history I was only beginning to comprehend. The cat remained, a bronze statue in the gloom, its astrolabe eye reflecting the flickering light with an unsettling knowingness. Click, whir. The sound of the astrolabe, a tiny, precise mechanism, seemed to mock my confusion. It wasn't him. It couldn't have been. The fight, the resistance, the Kuri fought, all of it a meticulously crafted illusion. The translation program remained stubbornly silent, offering no fragmented whispers, no distorted echoes. A vacuum of understanding pressed against my skull, amplifying the quartz hum until it felt like a physical tremor. The palazzo itself seemed to hold its breath, the silence a suffocating weight. I ran a hand along the wall, the cool, polished steel rough against my fingertips. It wasn't steel, it was stone intricately carved, but layered beneath a veneer of something. Manufactured. Something unnatural. My fingers brushed against a hairline crack, and a tendril of green, impossibly vibrant, snaked out, retracting quickly as I pulled away. A vine, growing through the stone. The photograph. The overgrown courtyard, the crumbling statues swallowed by foliage. I dismissed it as a historical anomaly, a fanciful artist's rendering. Now I saw it with a sickening clarity. It wasn't a depiction of the past. It was a glimpse of the present, of what the Palazzo Silenzio be. A low groan resonated through the hallway, a deep guttural sound that seemed to emanate from the very foundations of the building. Frink-creak rumble. It wasn't the sound of settling stone. It was the sound of something stretching. I spun around, lantern held high, but the hallway remained unchanged. Or so it seemed, a subtle shift in perspective, a barely perceptible narrowing of the space. The cat's rumble intensified, a low, vibrating purr that resonated in my chest. It wasn't comforting. It was expectant. I felt a prickling sensation on my skin, a sense of being watched, not by the cat, but by something far larger, far more ancient. The quartz hum pulsed, a rhythmic throbbing that mirrored the unsettling groan of the palazzo. I backed away, my boots scraping against the stone floor. The walls seemed to be closing in, the shadows deepening, coalescing into grotesque shapes. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Simba, a sound like the movement of leaves, but there were no leaves. Just stone, just steel, just the oppressive silence punctuated by the relentless drip. Drip, drip, drip. It was a lie. Everything I'd believed, everything I'd fought for, a fabrication. Il Custode, the protector, was merely an extension of this thing. A projection, a puppet controlled by the palazzo itself. The translation program, the fractured voices, the distorted messages, all carefully orchestrated to lead me here, to this moment of realization. The realization was a physical blow, a wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. I stumbled, bracing myself against a wall, the cold stone pressing against my back. The vines reappeared, thicker this time, snaking across the walls, the ceiling, the floor. They weren't growing, they were emerging, bursting forth from the stone as if the palazzo itself were a giant, slumbering plant finally awakening. I looked at the cat, its astrolabe eye gleaming in the dim light. It didn't blink. It didn't flink. It simply watched, a silent, metallic judge. The palazzo groaned again, a deeper, more resonant sound, and the walls began to shift, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but undeniably closing in. The vines writhed, reaching, as if eager to embrace me. The scent of rain intensified, a suffocating shroud. The sentence resonated, a crystalline clarity amidst the static. The gardener welcomes you, the translation program for the first time in weeks, offered a complete, uncorrupted phrase. It wasn't a revelation, not exactly. It was a confirmation of a dread I'd been circling, a truth I'd desperately tried to deny. The gardener, not a person. The palazzo. The vines surged. They weren't merely growing now. They were siraching tendrils thick as my arm, slick with an oily sheen. I pushed against them, a futile gesture, the stone floor slick beneath my boots. Shh. The cat's astrolabe eye pulsed, a mocking beacon in the encroaching green. Each push felt like battling a living tide, the vines coiling around my limbs, their touch strangely warm, unsettlingly familiar. The courtyard. I remembered the photograph, the faded image of crumbling statues and overgrown paths. It hadn't been a glimpse of the past, it had been a prophecy. I spun, attempting to navigate through the suffocating foliage, but the hallway had warped, elongated the distance to any perceived exit, stretching into an impossible infinity. The scent of rain intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated my tongue. Fyrosol scrape. The sound of leaves, a constant whispering chorus, seemed to emanate from the vines themselves. My reflection flickered in the astrolabe eye. A distorted image, my face gaunt, streaked with grime, partially obscured by a curtain of emerald leaves. It wasn't my face, not entirely. Something else was there, something green. A faint tracery of veins, pulsing beneath the skin. I recoiled, a gasp escaping my lips, but the vines tightened their grip. The palazzo groaned, a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through my bones. Creak. Thump. It wasn't settling, it was sindig expanding. The stone walls subtly shifting, pressing inward. The quartz hum intensified, a piercing whine that threatened to shatter my eardrums. I tried to scream, but the vines constricted, silencing the sound before it could escape my throat. No, I choked out, the word muffled by the encroaching foliage. No, this isn't happening. The memory of my father's research, his obsession with forgotten civilizations, flashed through my mind. He'd sought to understand, to categorize, to forty control. And he'd failed. Just as I was failing, the cat moved, gliding effortlessly through the tangle of vines, its astrolabe eye fixed on me. It wasn't a predator. It was a guide, a shepherd leading me to my assimilation. The vines tightened further, a gentle, insistent pressure that felt less like restraint and more like embrace. I struggled, a desperate, flailing dance against an inevitable tide. My fingers scrabbled at the stone, finding only slick, green surfaces. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Drip, drip, drip. The incessant rhythm, a metronome counting down to my surrender. The translation program sputtered, emitting a burst of static before delivering another fragmented phrase. Root, grow, become. It wasn't a command, it was an invitation, a promise. Emerging. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the final, suffocating embrace. My reflection in the Astrolabe shifted again. The green tracery was more pronounced now, spreading like a stain across my face. My eyes, once hazel, now reflected the emerald glow of the vines. The vines had begun to weave into my hair, intertwining with the strands, becoming one. I opened my eyes, staring into the cold, metallic gaze of the cat. My own face, partially obscured by the vines, stared back. A face that was no longer entirely my own. A face that was beginning to resemble the gardener. The invitation settled in my mind, a strange serenity blooming amidst the panic. Foodie root, grow, become. The words echoed, not in my ears but within the marrow of my bones. The scent of rain on pavement intensified, a cloying sweetness that coated my tongue, a perverse perfume. It wasn't unpleasant, not precisely. It was grounding. The vines tightened, a gentle, insistent pressure, less restraint now, more integration. My limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. I tried to fight, to claw at the stone floor, but my fingers found only slick, yielding surfaces. The palazzo groaned, a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate from within my own chest. Thrum, thrum. A pulse, organic and insistent, radiating outwards, enveloping me. It wasn't a tremor of decay, it was the rhythm of burgeoning life. The quartz crystal oscillator frequency modulation, the constant whine that had been a soundtrack to my descent, began to fade, replaced by a softer, more pervasive sound. Pui. The rustling of leaves, a whispering chorus that seemed to emanate from the vines themselves. The cat sat perched atop a vine-covered archway, a silent, watchful sentinel. Its astrolabe, a cold, metallic disc, reflected the encroaching green. It wasn't judging, it was observing, a guide perhaps, or simply a witness to the inevitable. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching myself struggle, a puppet caught in a macabre dance. My memories flickered forfin. My father's frantic research, the crumbling photographs, the desperate hope of understanding. He'd sought to dissect, to categorize, to control, and the palazzo had swallowed him whole. The vines were weaving not just around my limbs, but toward me. A creeping tendril traced a path across my cheek, cool and damp against my skin. I didn't flinch. There was no point. Resistance was a futile gesture, a spasm of defiance against a force far greater than myself. The palazzo wasn't attacking, it was embracing, assimilating. A faint echo of the translation program's static, a ghost of the man I once was. I closed my eyes, bracing for the final embrace. But it wasn't a suffocation. It was a merging, a sense of expansion, as if my consciousness was spreading, diffusing into the very stone of the palazzo, into the rustling leaves, into the pulsing rhythm of the vines. The scent of rain deepened, saturating my senses, blurring the boundaries between myself and the environment. I opened my eyes. The world swam into focus, but it was different. The shadows seemed deeper, the colors more vibrant. The palazzo wasn't just a structure, it was a living organism, and I was becoming a part of it. My reflection in the cat's astrolabe shifted again. The green tracery was no longer a stain, it was an integral part of my being. My eyes, once hazel, now reflected the emerald glow of the vines. A chilling acceptance settled over me. There was no fear, no regret, only a sense of completion. I reached out, my hand brushing against the rough bark of a vine. It felt familiar, like an extension of my own arm. A tendril curled around my finger, a gentle, welcoming embrace. Creak, thump. The palazzo pulsed, a rhythmic heartbeat that resonated within my very soul. I looked down at my hands. They were changing. The skin was becoming smoother, greener, the veins beneath the surface more prominent. Small leaves sprouted from my fingertips, delicate and vibrant. I raised my hand, examining the transformation with a detached curiosity. It wasn't a violation, it was a revelation. A homecoming. The cat tilted its head, its astrolabe gleaming in the dim light. It emitted a low, guttural purr, a sound that seemed to resonate from the very foundations of the palazzo. It wasn't a sound of triumph, it was a sound of welcome, a sound of belonging. I smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of my lips. The smile wasn't mine, not entirely. It was a smile that belonged to the palazzo, a smile that belonged to the gardener. The vines tightened around me, a final, gentle embrace. The last vestiges of Frederick Castillo dissolved, absorbed into the verdant tapestry of the palazzo. A close-up of my face, reflected in the astrolabe, revealed a visage almost entirely obscured by the encroaching verdant growth. The skin was smooth and green, the eyes glowing with an eerie emerald light. The expression wasn't one of terror or despair. It was a chilling acceptance, a serene, almost blissful surrender.